affected us. What you mean? Pollutants persisting in the air and stop the pops. Got to be aware of how we use and we dispose them. Stop the pops, stop the pops, stop the pops. What that? Pops are persistent organic pollutants, bad for the earth, animals, even humans. Pops found in the things we use and know. Pesticide contain things round the household. Don't burn up our whole car not tire. It's toxic whenever we get exposed. Dispose of pops in a better way. Recycle reusable things and all plastic. Use proper protective gear when you dispose pesticides. Compost organic food, the right thing to do. Right now we've got to stop the pops. Stop the pops. Stop the pops! There's something in the atmosphere that's affecting us. What you mean? Pollutants persisting in the air and it's cancerous. So let's stop the pops, stop the pops. Got to be aware of how we use and we dispose them. Stop the pops, stop the pops. What that? Pops are persistent organic pollutants, bad for the earth, animals, even humans. Pops found in the things we use and know. Pesticide contain things round the household. Don't burn up our whole car not tire. It's toxic whenever we get exposed. Dispose of pops in a better way. Recycle reusable things and all plastic. Use proper protective gear when you dispose pesticides. Compost organic food, the right thing to do. Right now we've got to stop the pops. Stop the pops. Stop the pops! There's something in the atmosphere that's affecting us. What you mean? Pollutants persisting in the air and it's cancerous. So let's stop the pops, stop the pops. Got to be aware of how we use and we dispose them. Stop the pops, stop the pops. What that? Pops are persistent organic pollutants, bad for the earth, animals, even humans. Pops found in the things we use and know. Pesticide contain things round the household. Don't burn up our whole car not tire. It's toxic whenever we get exposed. Dispose of pops in a better way. Recycle reusable things and all plastic. Use proper protective gear when you dispose pesticides. Compost organic food, the right thing to do. Right now we've got to stop the pops. Stop the pops.
Certain pesticides. Fire retardants used by firefighters. PCBs in electrical transformers. Burning garbage. These are just a few sources of persistent organic pollutants, POPs. That's because these chemicals are toxic to humans and animals. They can travel long distances from their original source of discharge. They are not easily degradable, but persist in the environment for several years, even decades, and have a chemical structure that allows them to accumulate in the fatty tissues of humans and animals. Persistent organic pollutants, POPs for short, are dangerous if not properly handled and disposed. In response to this global environmental problem, the Stockholm Convention on Persistent Organic Pollutants, which was adopted in 2001 and entered into force in 2004, requires its parties to take measures to eliminate or reduce the release of POPs into the environment. As a party to the Stockholm Convention, the government of Jamaica has developed national implementation plans that support the management of POPs. The country's most recent plan was prepared with the support of the Global Environment Facility, GEF, and the United Nations Development Programme. The management of POPs requires a multi-sectoral approach, implementation plans that support.
Good afternoon, friends and partners. I would like to extend a warm welcome to those joining us here on location at UNDP, as well as those joining us virtually on Zoom, Facebook, and YouTube. This is UNDP's Help Series, our regular live session where we offer tips, resources, and information from our project portfolio that you may find useful. Today, we show you how to spot, avoid, and destroy persistent organic pollutants, POPs for short, because they are dangerous to both human health and the environment. Now, the United Nations Development Programme Multi-Country Office in Jamaica has proudly supported Jamaica in the development of its National Implementation Plan to reduce POPs in Jamaica with funding from the Global Environment Facility, GEF. We have more than tips and resources for you today. We will also learn about Jamaica's progress in eliminating POPs and explore next steps and future plans. Our special guest this afternoon is Bethune Morgan, Manager, Pollution Prevention Branch of the National Environment and Planning Agency, NEPO. We encourage you to share, comment, and like the live feed, and to upload your own questions on this event using the hashtags StopThePops and hashtag UNDP Help Series. During the Q&A, there will be an open mic here on location and on Zoom for guests to participate. Guests on social media, please write down your questions and we will share them live. It is now my distinct honor to introduce Ms. Bethune Morgan, Manager for Pollution Prevention Branch of the National Environment and Planning Agency, NEPO. Good afternoon, Ms. Morgan. Great to have you with us today.
Thank you.
Let's dive right into it. What are POPs and why are they called persistent organic pollutants or forever chemicals?
All right, so by virtue of their name, persistence, they stay around for a while. They do not degrade. They accumulate, they bioaccumulate, and as such, even long after use, one can detect them, whether in receptors such as soil, or they may be found in tissue, human tissue, animal tissue, and they also can be found far from where they were used. And as such, persistent, they're organic in nature, and they're definitely pollutants. Persistent organic pollutants. Forever, because you can find them years after, and thus the name POPs and forever chemicals.
All right. So tell us, what are some of the POPs we find around our homes and communities daily?
Or lighting fixtures or bulbs, the ballast in these fluorescent lights. They have PCBs, polychlorinated biphenyls. PCBs are also a part of our transmission network for electricity, so our transformers have them in there as well. And it's an essential, what we call a dielectric. Other than these, we can find POPs in or TVs, so plastics that we have around, so our monitors, furniture, carpets. We can also encounter POPs, that which we call U-POPs, and the U is for unintentional. So these POPs are generated not because you intended to generate them, but by virtue of an activity, a very popular one we like to do culturally in this country, open burning. So everybody think they need to heap up the leaves in the morning or heap up whatever is around the yard and burn it. We're causing unintentional POPs. So that, as well as we have agricultural practices, clearing of lands, the burning to do that is also generating some POPs. And so these are just a snapshot of some of what we encounter daily.
Around the homes and communities.
Homes and communities.
All right, how do POPs impact humans and the environment?
Well, the POPs, they can be released whether through water release, air, and in being released, whether at manufacturing stage or during use or disposal, there can be entry to soil, water, air, and you release to water and you're then impacting organisms that are in that ecosystem. The soil also has an ecosystem. To air, we also have the potential for humans to directly inhale, and as such, you can then have take-up by the humans. Take-up can also be from consumption of the organisms that live in the aquatic environment that has been impacted by the POPs. And then what you find is as you go up the food chain, the POPs bioaccumulate. We eat. It's then found in our systems. It's found in the system of people who live far away from where it is generated, because you also have migratory species. So birds that fly south and then they go back north, depending on the time of the year, they are now carrying as well the POPs and impacting. And from the standpoint of our health, some of these chemicals, they mimic our endocrine system chemicals, and as such they can cause developmental impairment biologically and in many other ways, and our system or hormones, this includes like our thyroid, the testes. And so you can imagine if you have something mimicking some of these hormones, then you could have fertility issues, you can have, And so the range is great, the impact that it can have on our human health.
Yes, and of course, there are also studies have shown that POPs have been found in pregnant women.
Yes,
then through the process of breastfeeding, of course, it can affect
there have been assessments done on Jamaican women in 2011, in 2017, breast milk, also for the umbilical cord, and POPs that were no longer in use locally, banned as pesticides for years, were still found in breast milk. And so we see the persistence. And therein too, you can have transference of POPs to the fetus as well.
Absolutely. All right, so having given an excellent preface, can you share with us what is NEPO's role in stopping the POPs?
Okay, well, NEPO as a primary regulatory entity is a part of that institutional and legislative framework for addressing the POPs. We have air quality regulations that actually have the POPs. There were the dirty dozen, and those dirty dozen POPs are actually in the air quality regulations as priority air pollutants. So we have regulations that are directly addressing these materials, these items, and we also have the potential to regulate the storage, the disposal, the management of facilities that would generate POPs unintentionally. We also have the capability through our regulatory system as well, where there may be need for storage of, say, transformers before they are exported. They would require storage under certain conditions. So we have a permit and licenses system that you require a permit for the storage and conditions to be met during storage. And we also have regulations that govern the transboundary movement of this waste when it's being exported to another territory for environmentally sound management. So where we're unable to conduct a particular practice locally, we have the regs to ensure that it's governed appropriately, and then that which will allow it to be exported under convention requirements for treatment elsewhere. The agency also is involved in public education and sensitization, and that is going to be key and is key in the execution of our requirements under the Stockholm. The agency currently has an MOU with the Ministry of Education, and as such there is an avenue by which we can actually extend this along with other environmental messages through to the schools.
And in terms of that disposal mechanism, how are we doing? Because I know that in 2025 we have to phase out PCB, and by 2028 we have to totally eliminate them from our shores.
Right.
So how are we with that?
Well, the context in which NEPA operates, the matter of POPs is it crosses sectors, and as such we don't have the entire responsibility or control over the entire situation, but that which we do have. So we have facilitated the movement. There have been a couple exports, not just that which impacts the energy sector in terms of transformers, but there has been facilitation as well as obsolete pesticides going out. And where the pesticides are concerned, there is no more permission or approval that is granted for POPs, pesticides that are POPs, to be imported. And obsolete stockpiles have already been exported. So the pesticides have been quite advanced in terms of the elimination of local use. And the PCB, we're seeing where there are alternative oils that are in more recent transformers that are being used, and where those who are using those transformers are taking them out the system once they become defective. And there is stockpiling till there is sufficient mass to do the export.
Yes. All right. What are Jamaica's key obligations under the Stockholm Convention?
Well, the key obligation would be to ensure that those POPs, especially that, those that are in Annex A, which are for elimination, that Jamaica is not allowing the import and the use of these POPs. So that is primary. There are annexes, though, that allow for restriction of use, and that means that there are some exemptions. But primarily, we would want to ensure that if there are to be POPs that are presenting for our nation, especially as it relates to the unintentional POPs, it would be near to impossible to eliminate those, because those are coming out of an activity being done. So education along that line to get persons to refrain from burning, utilizing waste management services to cut back on those. But our primary task as regulators are to ensure that there's protection of the environment and human health from POPs where they exist, and where we can avoid and eliminate their use locally, to do so.
So I see that we have a great task ahead of us to ensure that even the common burning that Jamaicans love to do on a daily basis is, we're using more waste management systems and structures in place to prevent that.
Right.
All right, what is next on the agenda for NEPA to ensure we completely eliminate POPs? I think you would have alluded to it earlier, but what's next on the agenda to ensure that we completely eliminate POPs?
Well, we have to acknowledge that they can't be completely eliminated.
Absolutely.
And but it's quite essential that where we have entities, facilities that have releases to the air, that we are improving our mechanisms for monitoring, for detection, so that we can fully regulate, ensure compliance, enforcement as it relates to our borders, that our border regulatory agencies are au fait with what should not be coming in. We have quite an astute pesticides control authority, and I'm certain that as it relates to the permits that are to be granted, that there would be extreme diligence there to ensure that there are no POPs as pesticides that are coming in. But our greatest challenge, I believe, would be those unintentional POPs, getting a handle on those activities that are generating those, or industries, whenever systems aren't maintained, then you find that boilers or engines, or even our vehicles, whenever we see our vehicles with smokes, it means that you do not have complete and proper combustion and you are generating POPs. And as such, the blind eye that we turn to some of these things, if we don't do that, then we would be advancing the elimination even of the unintentionally generated POPs.
All right. If you are just joining us, we are asking you and encouraging you to comment and like the live feed and to upload your own post on the event using the hashtag StopThePops and hashtag UNDP Help Series. Now, tell us, Bethune, what kind of percentages are we talking about in terms of POPs? What kind of percentages have been banned in Jamaica?
Well, when I think of a question like that, it's difficult to put an overall percentage.
Yes.
But if we were to speak successfully of a sector, it would be the pesticides, where there has been an effort to ensure that whatever is listed as POPs, that those are not pesticides that enter the country. Doesn't mean that the pesticides of other characteristics may not be toxic and need management. They certainly do. But the effort has been made to ensure that those pesticides that are POPs are not on the list that are permitted for imports. It's as it relates to the PCBs, it's difficult again to put a percentage there, but there has been significant movement of those out of the country, and we're hopeful that with the 2028 deadline that we will be at the levels that the convention requires us to be.
All right, what are some of the alternatives to POPs?
The alternatives to POPs. Okay, well, as it relates to our items in our homes, many of them, so our television and monitors and the carpets, that which is in them as POPs are they're for retardation should there be a fire, so they're flame retardants.
Right.
And there have been generated chemicals other than the brominated flame retardants, so they are on the market, they do exist. And so what you'll find is that your older devices or your older items, they may have the POPs as flame retardants, but your later products would have had alternatives to those brominated flame retardants. Those of us who cook or non-stick pans in the past, and there may still be some, would have had P4 or PFAS, and you can now read your product, see what is in it. You can make a choice that is not a pops related choice. So a ceramic pan is not, a pan that has pop in it. You have some brand names, I wouldn't look to call them, but there are alternatives, and we just need to be sensitizing our public as to common products that would have what are some of the names of these pops, and then you read your product, and ensure that you're purchasing alternative to the pops. As regulators, we could assist our consumers by ensuring that some of these products that have pops are not those that we're purchasing and bringing in for our consumers. But and as I alluded to earlier, even with the unintentional pops, we can change practices. We can modify our practices. Quit the burning. I passed through an upscale community one day, and I know they're not short of waste management trucks coming through, but there was somebody with a heap and they were burning. There are alternatives to clearing a land for agricultural, manual and mechanical methods. We don't need to burn. And we have sections of this city where every single day you can find burning happening. It's either happening for retrieval of metal from something, and that which is being burnt off is the plastic coating, and there you have your dioxins and your furans being generated. So therein are just a few examples of what we can do differently and what the alternatives are.
Yes, and I know that you indicated that some of the pots that we're using, so even recently, even your rice cooker may contain some of these harmful chemicals that we have to read the contents of the box to ensure that they are not containing these persistent organic pollutants. So tell us, Bethune, what can Jamaicans do to stop the pops in their own environment?
Well, some of it we alluded to earlier. Become more aware as well of reports and observations that we're seeing elsewhere and here as well.
And it's reporting to NEPA?
Reporting to NEPA. So you're passing and you see something that doesn't look quite too well coming out of the stack of a company. You really should not be seeing black emissions or white emissions. Report it to the regulators, because we may not be everywhere to see all things. If your neighbors are burning, there are entities to call. The NSWMA also has responsibility for waste management. So if we see breaches happening, know that your health is at risk, that of your community is at risk, and we're of a culture that we don't want to be informal, but at times it is a greater risk to us when we don't. And as I said, as consumers, take responsibility for the products you buy, the clothes you buy. Sometimes we'll see a product is promoted as being UV, offering UV protection. Check to see what that UV protection is provided by. At the recent COP, there was a new addition to the list of pops to be eliminated, and it was one for UV protection, UV 328, and another flame retardant was also added. So we can check our products, those products that when we buy clothes and our products are said to be stain free.
Right.
Those properties that are offered are sometimes of materials and chemicals that are pops. So just take the extra effort, do a bit of research on what you're buying, what is in it. If you don't see that info, then go buy a product where you can see the information, because even whilst in use, you can be exposed to the chemicals and suffer the effects of it, and it's long term, as we can see.
What about, I'll put in this bonus question, what about a message that you would send to parents and household in terms of children? Because they may hear POPs and they're thinking persistent organic pollutants. This seems like it's something for adults. It's only applicable to adults who are burning garbage, adults who are buying the pots, buying the pans, buying these furniture in the home, TV. What would you say to families who need to know more about POPs and by extension, let children know in school education? What would you say to families in terms of their awareness to POPs and perhaps NEPO's role in, spreading that message and educating about POPs?
Okay. Well, immediately comes to mind is the product that, through the assistance of UNDP, is one that it may look like a kiddies book, but it's more than a kiddies book. It's a family educational tool, and what it does is to bring to real life for kids and their families some of the things that they interface with, that which is in their home. I think as it relates to children, and children love fire.
Yes.
I think the messages as it relates to fires would be one that they could relate to quite readily, from a safety standpoint, not just about being burned, but should we have an accident in the home, some of our basic household items, once they start to burn, that which we're impacted by. Or something as simple as, to fight fire, you would want to probably have a fire extinguisher in your home, but you also want to pay attention to what is in that fire extinguisher. Is it a foam that has a POPs, or is it a PFAS-free, firefighting agent? And so just things which are everyday in our homes, not because the fire looks pretty, let's not burn the plastic bottle, let's not. And that would be the basic message
to families. And also to access the POPs book from NEPA, to have that as a family engagement. And it's also summer, so kids like to play outside, so even playing in the, vehicles that are not in use, that is also something that they would have to be mindful of. Right,
and or vehicles, even us as drivers, when they're locked up for long, those dashboards, most of what are in your vehicles, flame retardants, and then depending on the age, Jamaicans like to have imported used vehicle. So whereas a later vehicle might not have something, an older one is likely to have it. So we want to be cautious going into the vehicles, open them, allow some air ventilation before we get in, because if it's an older model and the interior has whether UV protection or flame retardant, then you maybe over time be exposed to POPs.
All right. So as we seek to get rid of POPs in Jamaica, UNDP and NEPA have joined forces to educate children and families about POPs, also known as forever chemicals. I videotaped a special message promoting this excellent resource for families. You can secure your copy at NEPA. Take a look.
Hi there parents, I wanted to introduce you to Let's Get Rid of Persistent Organic Pollutants. I'm proud to share that the United Nations Development Program is supporting the government of Jamaica in raising the level of awareness about persistent organic pollutants. And so we have created this book, POPs and the Family. Let's color, solve and learn. So you might be asking, what are POPs? POPs is persistent organic pollutants, and they can be harmful to health and the environment. Now, how can you get involved? We want the entire family and Jamaica to come on board and help us to stop the pops. In this activity book, we help to share some useful resources of how parents can support to ensure that their children are not exposed to pops. At the back of the book, we have some tips. Parents, you have to come along with us on this pops journey. Now, here are some of the interesting tips that we have. We want to ask you to avoid playing in old and discarded vehicles as they may contain these persistent organic pollutants. Who like to burn garbage in the backyard? Can you believe that when you burn rubber tiles, when you burn chemicals, when you burn electrical wires, those are actually releasing pops? Let all of us come together and help to stop the pops.
All right, and now we have a word about pops pesticides. How has Jamaica progressed in protecting farmers and garden enthusiasts from these types of forever chemicals? Let's watch this clip featuring the Pesticides Control Authority.
PCA has continued the work of removing some of the pesticides that are on the Stockholm Convention. And in 2011, we also placed 4 additional pesticides on our second schedule. So that's our prohibited list. As it is now in 2021, I can say that Jamaica is almost free of persistent organic pollutants for pesticides. PCA.
All right, so we would like to thank Ms. Bethune Morgan from the National Environment and Planning Agency for joining us this afternoon. And of course, Ms. Bethune Morgan is the Manager, Pollution Prevention Branch of NEPA. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon, Ms. Morgan. Now, if you are just joining us, we encourage you to share, comment, and like the live feed, and to upload your own post on this event using the hashtags StopThePops and UNDP Help Series. The floor is now open for questions and comments.
Hi, Carrie-Ann. Okay, there are 2 questions online I'm going to ask on behalf of Emma Lewis. The first question is, what area of our lives is most affected by POPs?
What area of our lives? I would say our health, and it's impacted and persons aren't aware as to what has caused the impact, or that they are even impacted until years down the road there is a presenting. And the thing is, as it relates to endocrine disruptors, we have what appears to be just regular ill health, but the trigger is not very clear for persons. And when you consider that our endocrine system, it has so many aspects to it that it could be a fertility matter to a thyroid issue that triggers a heart snap. It's varied, and it's not easy for one to correlate this to POPs, but they are seriously mimicking chemicals. And I would say that the greatest impact would be to our health, and that which persons aren't readily able to correlate to, especially if it is that your exposure has been due to long-range transfer of the problem. So a migratory species may have been responsible for your exposure, but because it wasn't used here or produced here, you would not have associated your ill health to such.
Okay, another question from Emma Lewis. What are the obsolete pesticides? I understand we are still using glyphosate, Roundup. Does this not contain POPs? And there have been court cases in the U.S. regarding cancer risk.
All right, so in the absence of the Pesticides Control Authority, the best response that I could give is that those that were named just now may actually not be listed under the convention. DDT is one of those pesticides that is a POPs, and it is not one that is in use. So, but the Roundup, and one would first have to check the chemical name and see if it is that it's listed, and I greatly doubt that it is listed, because we have ceased to allow for the import of those pesticides that are POPs. Mm-hmm.
To our live studio audience, please, of course, indicate that you have a question by raising your hand, and you will be acknowledged and a microphone provided to you. And for our guests on Zoom, please use the Q&A feature or the raise hand feature, and we will open your mic to allow you to speak. For our guests on social media, please write down your questions and we will share them live in your name. We are still on the floor for questions.
Hi, good afternoon. I am Janine Shepard. I am one of the youth partners here for UNDP. I run Youth for Excellence. And I'm quite curious, what plans currently does NEPA have to engage youth regarding its awareness campaigns on POPs? I have a project coming up right now with the Ministry of Agriculture and ROD and several other entities regarding Farm the Future, which is supposed to be a more climate resilient form of agricultural training, hydroponics, aquaponics, that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. But before coming here, as a young person, I never even knew what POPs were. So I want to do my part, but I want to know, are there any plans to engage us, say, beyond this session?
Well, we have an MOU with the Ministry of Education, and so through that relationship, there would be transmission, particularly using the book that was generated through the UNDP and under the project. We also have, we've already been distributing through not just the schools, but through church entities. Staff have been taking through to their church groups, their Sunday schools. Right now, there are summer camps happening. My church, their summer camp starts with their juniors this week. They tend to have as part of their activities nature studies and varied activities. So it's my intent to take some of these as well for use, because you have kids coming from all over the country, varied communities, varying churches. So we are using as many opportunities and avenue, and we do have the structured setup with the Ministry of Education as well to use as an avenue for sensitization of the youth.
Yes, and I see that as a great opportunity to perhaps foster that, continued cohesiveness with NEPA, with UNDP, to really create more awareness around POPs. We're still on the floor with questions.
I have a question coming from online on Instagram. The question is, in the area of the cleaner environment, Ms. Morgan, and what are those gases that are cleaner? I presume the question is asking about the alternatives. What are some of the cleaner gases that are used? What are some of the causes or effects?
All right, cleaner gases. Well, if you're going to go for, I'm assuming that the question is coming maybe from a context of power generation, and we have seen where there has been fuel with lower sulfur content, but if it is that we want to be considering cleaner in the general context, then you would really want to be looking at those generating capacities that are not using fossil fuel, and more renewables, or solar or wind. We're able to use tidal. In a country like ours, we do have the potential for enhanced solar, but we would want to be using less of the fossil fuels if we're going to think cleaner. And even with the fossil fuels, there has been the opportunity of making them cleaner by desulfurizing them, and based on some of the sources, whether less of the heavy metals in there. Hopefully that would have responded to that person, and as such, moving away from those fuels, if you don't have complete combustion, then you're looking at less dioxins and furans, which is where you get the unintentional pops being generated. Mm-hmm.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Indy McClymont Lafayette. I'm a communications consultant working on issues like environment. And congratulations on this initiative. It's been a while since I've seen anything publicly on POPs, and I think so much more needs to be done. But my question is the material that you're working on and developing, their dissemination. Will we be seeing, for example, more videos and stuff in mainstream media and social media on these issues? And I must declare my vested interest, because at home, my dad and I have a constant tussle because he loves to burn. And so we argue all the time. So what he does is, when I'm not there, that's when he chooses to burn, because I put on my foot, no burning. But so I want some of these stuff that I can, when you get sometime another perspective other than your child telling your daddy X, Y, and Z. Just somewhat, when he sees a campaign, then he can also see objectively that this is a big issue. So I really would like to know the plans for getting the general public more aware.
Mm-hmm. All right, that sounds like part of a broader communication plan, which I don't know that I'm in a position to speak to, but as it relates though to the message of just burning, we unfortunately haven't done well across the regulatory sector in enforcing those regulations and laws that exist as it relates to burning. And if we could improve on the compliance regime surrounding those, we would actually address many other issues. So if it is that those orders and those nuisance regulations, that if we could get to the stage where we're not afraid of some of the social issues that accompany some of the areas that we have the prevalence of these activities, and we can have a police officer not standing right next to a little heap that somebody just lit, and he responds to the fact that that is actually an illegal activity, and persons recognize that, there is an action that can be taken that is a legal action because I burned something in my yard, then we would have less of that. Because what you find is that when you tell persons about, POPs is going to affect my health, I'm going to go dead one day, Unfortunately, that's a reaction you get sometimes when you try to use the health stance, and especially if it's not a death that's going to be immediate, you sometimes don't get the needle being pushed as much. But if we could improve on that regulatory compliance to burning being illegal and it not being allowed to be a cultural practice that we keep propagating by not doing anything, then we could solve some of those issues. And unfortunately, the persons who burn are the ones who don't have asthmatics in their home, or they wouldn't burn, and Yeah, but you'll have that those persons are more sensitive to the issue of burning because it is a lethal activity for those persons. Yeah.
Hi, it's me again. So I'm actually very interested in everything that you've been saying here. That's why I've just been firing off with some questions. But, you know, what you just touched on in terms of the issue being only relevant to persons who would mostly suffer from it, in the, like, you know, it's saliency, it's at the front of your mind. I want to really bring that to agriculture. I'm just recommending, if it's not already thought about, some sensitization sessions for farmers. If that's something that you're looking to do, I'd be happy to help with that whole process. So just throwing it out there, plugging that, hey, we have Farm the Future. So if NEPO wants to look at that, you know.
All right, noted. Thank you.
All right, another question coming in from the Zoom platform, Carrie-Ann.
Yes.
How much does the manufacturing and other industries contribute to POPs, and what can we do about it? And are there industry regulations? So that's a three-part question.
All right, you want to repeat those questions?
Sure. How much does the manufacturing and other industries contribute to POPs? What can we do about it? And are there industry regulations?
Okay. So industry would contribute from the standpoint where if they are manufacturing and emissions are being generated and their systems aren't well maintained. So just like with your vehicle, if you don't service it on time, your combustion is not going to be appropriate and correct, and you're going to be blowing black. So similarly with industry, those who have activities that have them having a stack and generating an emission, if the maintenance regime is not maintained, you will find that their outputs from their stacks are going to be generating unintentional POPs. And yes, there is a regulatory regime for such operations. There's an air quality regulation, though a license under that is applicable when an operation is at a certain extent. But even when it's not, the manufacturing process itself is likely to be one that is one of our prescribed categories, and as such requires an environmental permit. And by having the environmental permit, if there is a source for air emissions, then an emissions inventory would be required of such an entity. And there are regulatory readings that are done of their stacks. So that would be my response to that three-part question. Mm-hmm.
We have another question on the floor. Go ahead.
Not really a question. My name is Aaron Silk. I'm an artist coordinator of Voices for Climate Change Education under Panos Caribbean. And we are currently in partnership with UNDP and Cool Down Jamaica campaign. You know, right now I'm seeing that there's a great need, you know, for awareness and also sensitization and what is happening with POPs. You know, so Voices for Climate Change Education, we're throwing ourselves out there to NEPO because this is what we do. You know, as artists, we bring the message with entertainment, draw the mass of people, the people who would normally be neglected, are the people who normally don't have interest in what you're hearing, even with burning. You know, because I heard you said earlier about people with asthmatic family members. A lot of them are not aware, still not aware that, you know, this is a problem and is a hazard to their own children in burning, because a lot of them still does. You know, so this, you know, really, this is really asking for the help of Voices for Climate Change Education to bring some, you know, awareness.
Okay. Noted, and I'll I'll ensure that our pub side knows that there was an invitation that was put out there.
You have two.
Two. Yes.
We have another question online.
Yes, Carrie Ann, another question coming in from Shanique Lee Lontz. Her question is, has NEPA considered partnering with the Jamaica Fire Brigade's Fire Prevention Division to sensitize the public on the disadvantages of practicing open burning?
All right, they partnering with the fire brigade as it relates to open burning. Offhand, I can't say that we have partnered in that context, but we do work and partner with the fire brigade on other matters, and even in the context of POPs, when the project was being done to update our implementation plan, the fire brigade would have been integral to that activity and that process. They are actually one of the users of a significant POP. There are some firefighting foams that are POPs, and they are making efforts to ensure that alternatives are what they use. But there are other entities, though, that other regulatory bodies as it relates to open burning, such as those under the Public Health Department and the NSWME as well. And so what you'd find is that we do collaborative efforts and work with them. At times when there are events, whether they be incidental fires at the disposal site or wherever, we will combine to have monitoring done. And so within that context, more for the open burning, more so with other regulatory partners, but we also otherwise partner with the fire brigade.
Any other questions?
Another question from me personally, Ms. Morgan. I wondered if you could just clarify and reiterate how you can identify or you can spot POPs, what you can do personally as an individual to stop it, and just reiterate for me the impact that POPs can have in a real way on your health and on the health of humans as well as animals.
And the environment.
Okay, so identification, to be able to identify, we need to be sensitizing so persons are aware what are POPs, you know. So we'll see acronyms, we'll see PCB. We may not be able to identify some, but if we know that items that are plastic may likely have features that we don't want the plastic to break down in the sunlight, or we have or plastic in the home, whether products, toys, we don't want these toys, should they be burned, to release. So though persons may not be able to identify the POPs themselves, in sensitizing though as to what items are likely to have POPs, then we can instruct, read labels when it comes on to say buying our pots and pans. But with some of our bottles, when you look at them, you'll actually see it says free, you know. So when you look at the items, people are now marketing the items to say that they are particular item free, you know, BPA free, P4 free, you know. And so you want to be guided by labels such as this. As it relates to the impact on our health, we can be impacted not just by that which will burn, but just in use of an item that may have the POPs. You can be so exposed. You can be exposed over time if you're using a non-stick pan that has P4 in it and you weren't aware before. So if you have a non-stick and you're uncertain because the label may be gone, you might just want to park it and just go buy one that is ceramic or that has labeling that you can identify. So if you're in doubt about something, the age of, you have an old TV at home with big back, you know, you know, you have an old car, you want to be a little bit more circumspect, you know, with those, because you might not have labels to guide you. And, you know, you may see that, you know, over time there is this matter of your health that's impacted. You know, you've heard today's, you know, you hear that, you know, these pops can be endocrine disruptors. You could ask your GP, you know, do you think I may have been exposed to pops? Could I have a check done, blood check, urine check done for particular items, for pops, you know? And we would be taking charge in a different way of our health, and not, you know, the doctor might not know that we were from a particular community or environment of, you know, exposure. It might have been a work exposure, it might be from your residential exposure, but we could be a little bit more circumspect when we think of our health and we see ourselves presenting with particular ailments and illnesses. Yeah.
Sure, one last question on the floor.
Hi, so I'm hearing about these pops, right? And, you know, wanting to sensitize people. But something I'm kind of wondering just from listening, why is it that pops seems to be so prevalent? Is it that non-pops products are more expensive? And then how do we, say, like, increase equity, like access to these form of non-pops products? I'm just asking if that's the case. I'm not sure.
Mm-hmm. I don't know that I could speak to the cost of a pop-free versus, you know. I would say though that there are significant, especially as it relates to those Annex A chemicals, and those are the ones that are for complete elimination. There would have been alternatives, because a part of the process for having something on that list is for an alternative to be identified, and there's a screening process that each chemical goes through before it is placed on that list. And that screening criteria, it includes socioeconomic considerations as well. So I would say that things are available, alternatives are available, and where we're concerned as a small island state, where we don't actually manufacture things, we primarily buy things. It's as the manufacturers and the developers go that our purchase and consumption goes. And so we just need to make an intelligent choice as to what we are buying.
Absolutely important.
I was totally ignorant to this POPs. This is the first time I'm hearing about it. So now I heard you said something about the doctor, but are the doctors aware of this and know about and know how to, you know, because this is very important.
Yes.
You know?
Well, the doctors, I would think our doctors would be aware that, especially as it relates to hormones, that there are hormone mimicking chemicals, and that's why you'd see when you go to the shop and you buy your chicken, you notice that the chicken is being promoted as hormone free.
But can they identify POPs differently?
POPs can be, yes. We do have at the university, we have labs. Some of the assessments that were done on Jamaican subjects, breast milk, these were done and assessed here at the university labs. So there are labs that can assess, and the world is such now that you can send your stuff to Florida. But yes, we do have our chemistry labs here at the universities that the potential is there to assess. Yeah.
I have a question. Can you explain the difference between the different types of POPs? Like, for example, the POPs that are in the packaging, and the POPs that are in the bottles?
Another question here, Kerry, the questions are coming in. Is there a list of pops that the public can access so that they do not purchase or use everyday items containing pops?
There is a list of pops. It's in the convention text. It's just that when the general public, if you look at some of these chemical names, you would not be, but and then we would have to be careful as well in terms of naming brands, Yes. So we would have to be cautious about putting out a list of, but we could speak non-generically, about non-stick. So, and we can tell you P4, this is the chemical acronym, and then you can when purchasing, because the manufacturers are wise and they are trying to advance market share by demonstrating that they have this product and it is free of PFAS, free of P4. It's just that sometimes we tend not to read the fine print, but it's there. But yes, there is a list. There's a list as is in the convention. It's just that it would look like a headache for somebody who is not a chemist or chemically inclined.
I think we have a question here.
I think that we can, as UNDP, we can undertake to perhaps extract some of that information from the Stockholm Convention and have it available on UNDP's website.
Yes.
To the extent that we can find simple language that explains some of that text in the Stockholm Convention, we undertake to have it available between this evening and tomorrow on UNDP's website. So you can go to www.undp.org/Jamaica, and that information will be available. We give that undertaking.
Yes. And just to reiterate again, the good thing about the production of the Pops and the Family book is that it was created in the context of Jamaica. So even when we look at paint, as Ms. Morgan had mentioned, the TV or furniture, simple things, and we have tips to the back of the book that indicate what families can do to stop or reduce their exposure to persistent organic pollutants. So this is a great resource, and it's also available on UNDP's website for access. And of course, you can visit NEPO to get your copy of this book.
I just wanted to endorse what Gillian said, because I thought that was a very low-hanging fruit. If we can get a NEPO person to just simplify it, and then UNDP pretty it up, and we get it out there, because that's simple but critical information that I certainly, and I'm sure everybody here in the public would like to have.
Any other questions? That's it for now. What an interesting feature it has been today in our UNDP Health Series. So as we wrap up today's Health Series topic on persistent organic pollutants, I extend a big thank you to Bethune Morgan, Manager, Pollution Prevention Branch of the National Environment and Planning Agency. Thank you very much, Ms. Morgan. Thanks to our studio audience as well, to those who joined us live on Zoom and social media. Remember to keep the conversation going online by using the hashtag StopThePops and hashtag UNDP Help Series. I am Carrie-Ann Willis, signing off on behalf of UNDP Multi-Country Office in Jamaica. We close this afternoon with a reminder of how to stay safe from POPs, followed by our corporate message from UNDP. Good afternoon.
My message to Jamaicans on a whole would be to take in high regard your health, appreciate the relationship between your health, your well-being, and the health of the environment.
Say the farming community, with all chemicals, you have to wear your personal protective equipment. Where possible, look for the alternative. So the distributor we're encouraging them to provide the alternative to the public, and the consumer, they must also be so aware that they look for the alternative, because they know that this particular chemical can have an adverse impact on your health. First of all, is to be informed. Then you make a conscious decision when you are shopping to look for environmentally friendly alternatives. And then the other thing you should do is to, when you are finished using the chemical, so for instance, even in the agriculture sector, when you are finished using the chemical, to dispose of the container in an environmentally sound manner. You have to be conscious about what the chemical is, what are the possible impacts on your health and the environment, and how you can protect yourself and protect others.
My message to Jamaicans on a whole would be to take in high regard your health, appreciate the relationship between.
In a world where poverty, inequality, and exclusion are on the rise, and nations remain vulnerable to crises like climate change, natural disaster, pandemic, too many of us are being left behind. Our journey to the Sustainable Development Goals, though delayed, is not denied. This challenge drives the mission of the United Nations Development Programme, UNDP, and energizes our team here and across 170 countries and territories. We are UNDP, determined to eradicate poverty, reduce inequalities and exclusion, and build resilience so countries can sustain progress. This is who we are and why we exist. We are UNDP, answering the call to solve these challenges through 6 signature solutions tailored to your country's needs and priorities. They're UNDP's multifaceted plan, focusing on keeping people out of poverty, ensuring governance for peaceful, just, and inclusive societies, facilitating crisis prevention and increased resilience while focusing on nature-based solutions for development, championing clean and affordable energy and gender equality. And now, the UNDP Multi-Country Office located in Jamaica is offering UNDP's signature solutions to Jamaica, Bermuda, Cayman Islands, the Bahamas, and Turks and Caicos Islands. Our signature solutions are the inspiration for a new country program designed in partnership with government and civil society. Together, we're taking aim at multidimensional poverty by addressing social resilience and inclusion, citizen safety and security, and rule of law, climate change resilience, and sustainable natural resource management. This means day to day, we are on the ground, supporting crisis prevention, response, and recovery from natural disaster, championing livelihoods that preserve and heal our planet, helping the vulnerable access opportunities to thrive, supporting countries accelerate action on climate change, supporting your vision for clean energy and water security, partnering for equity, justice, and security for all. We are UNDP, ready to mobilize development financing for your big ideas, ready to advance the effectiveness of your solutions with innovation and digitalization so that your solutions make a real difference in people's lives. We are UNDP. Count on us to maintain our global reputation for transparency and accountability on your development needs. Count on us to help you access our global policy network of experts and resources. If your goal is to end poverty, lift the marginalized, and strengthen your nation against crisis, think UNDP. We are ready. We are ready to partner on your solutions to eradicate poverty, reduce inequalities and exclusion, and build resilience so your countries can sustain progress. We are UNDP.